video, hopefully you have followed where we've got to. We obviously need to calculate the area of a circle to solve this problem, right? Now, the cost is a value which multiplies the area of the circle by that particular value. Okay, so we could actually write a cost function based on the area, because the cost of a particular circle, shall we say, is the money, whichever it is, 2.5 or 1, right, multiplied by the area we're interested in. So let's create a simple cost function. Okay, so define, and let's say cost of a circle, and we've got to pass it. Now this is where it gets interesting. What do we give it to calculate its answer? We have to give it everything. Well, we have to give it an area, okay, because that's going to be the area of a circle. You could give it an area, or you could give it a radius. So we'll try it in two different ways so I can show you how to link these things together. And then we need an individual price per centimeter cube. So why don't we say centimeter cost, right? That's kind of a bit long-winded. Centimeter squared cost. Okay, so if it's the base, it's 1. If it's the cheese, it's 2.5. And what's that going to give us back? Well, that function simply multiplies the area by the cost. So that's actually quite simple, that function. So that would just be area times the centimeter square cost. Now that's one way of approaching that function. Another way is that if your input is radius, you might want to do it like this. So I'm going to call this cost circle, and I'm going to pass it the radius. I need to talk about something in a moment, but let's just look at this alternative way. If you give me the radius, inside this function, I need to calculate the area of the circle. So I actually need to do the area. I call my other function, pass the radius to it inside this function, okay, and then I return, just like the other one, that. Now I want you to look at these two differences, because what we have here are two valid ways of doing this. It all comes down to how you are passing values around your program. If you have a main program and you get the radius from a user, then it might make more sense to use this version where you pass the radius in and internally it calculates the area. That area then is used in the calculation of the cost. If, however, you want to break it up so your user can see the area as you're going along, you might use this version, which gives back the area. You then use that and pass it into this version of the cost circle. We are temporarily going to just stick with this one here, but it's up to you how you want to do it. And let's test it. Let's give it some simple values and test that it works, right? So, and we're going to test it by putting it in a print statement. And so we say cost circle radius is, we said before, 10, and let's say that it's a penny, right? Or actually, if I look at what Matthew has written, he's calculating it by using 0.01 as the centimeter square cost. Okay, let's run that and see what that looks like. Now, what Matthew provides you in the lecture notes is a different approach of breaking the same problem down. And here we have our first issue. Square cost is not defined. So let's look at the error before we quickly move on. Can you spot what the issue is? I suspect we have an incorrectly named variable. When you have name error, it's often because there's a typo. And if you look at it, that one says square, the parameter says squared. Learn to spot those mistakes yourself, because that's often all they are. And it's very easy to do, as you can see from this simple video, right? So let's just run that. And that gives me back that. Now, how do I know that that's right? How can I break that problem down to know that actually that's calculated it correctly? You could hand write the code to prove it to you. And this is where testing comes in. So I'm going to glance very quickly over at Matthew's sample and see if he has some nice test data that we can test it against. We can do that at a later stage, but here's the question. That, if I'm calculating the base, if I'm calculating the cheese, that's what I do to calculate the cheese, okay? So let's have a look at that and see how that works. Now, the only thing you might argue with me is that the number's 0.01, and that gives me a different value. Okay, so we need to work out a way, and I'll leave that to you to think about. How do you verify that's correct for the cost calculus, cost of a circle? You've given a radius. If you're confident it calculates the area right, and you're confident that the area times the centimeters cost is right, then you should be reasonably okay. If, however, you've got errors, now we come to a very powerful element here. Because we tested area of circle, we can be confident that's correct. So if there's an error, it's not likely to be on that line. It's likely to be on that calculation line and whether we've understood that correctly. So writing functions, breaking the problem down and allowing yourself to use functions within functions is a very powerful technique.